In my last YouTube video, I talked a little bit about the need for or a want for drink alcohol. Now I'm saying that tonight I've got a little bit of water with some electrolytes in it because this is probably the hottest temperature wise show that I've recorded so far. It's about 30 degrees tonight, and I've turned the air conditioning off because I didn't want that to be like humming in your ears. So to try and get the audio as right as possible, I've turned the aircon off, which means it's warm. It's very warm tonight. It's just gone 11 p.m. here. It's late. Now, I'm going to come back to this topic of the video at the weekend, but let me just quickly say a special thanks to all of my Patreon members. I have 123 Patreon members now. And I don't take sponsorships on this channel. I haven't had any partnerships that I've thought have been valid. So I only earn through AdSense, and I now earn from Patreon, and I have 123 active members. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. If you're interested in joining Patreon, I make additional content on there. In the last few days, I've created a post to talk about the new 22% tax that has been introduced on ISAs and cash that you hold in stocks and shares. ISAs, introduced by the government, coming in next April, and going into more detail about that. But that's just a snapshot of the kind of things that I talk about on there, and a whole load more. There's about 150 individual posts so far, and you can access some of it for free, and then from as little as £5 a month. So if you're interested in that, link is in the description below. Right, that's my advert for this episode over. Right, let me dive back a little bit, and thanks everybody for joining me to sit and talk about this, not just live, but also if you are listening on Spotify or on Apple. It's amazing starting this up now and committing to it every week, episode 13. So last week, I made a video talking about alcohol and the kind of need for quiet. And it was fascinating watching the interpretation of that video, because I received so many email communications from people to kind of resonate with the topic, but interpreted in so many different ways. And that's something that I'm having to come to terms with. And by what I mean by come to terms with is it's a little bit like when you hear an artist, like a musician, right, that makes a song and they sing a lyric and they put it out into the world. And then you go into forums and you go into discussion pages and people pick it apart and think about what it relates to and what they see the meaning in that song. And kind of making YouTube videos is a little bit like that to me, because sometimes I think about a topic and I put it out there and then I kind of see it being analyzed and dissected and reviewed by viewers, and sometimes replayed then back to me. And that last video had a lot of communications from people, and some of them really leaned into how I was trying to deliver it. Some were more communicating their own situation in that topic, and others were just completely off the mark. But I'm just grateful to have the communications from people. Now, what I mean by that is I talked about this kind of want for alcohol, but it wasn't really about alcohol. It wasn't about a need for, like, God, I really need a beer or I need to get drunk. It wasn't about that. As I take a sip of that electrolyte, it was about a need for quiet, an internal quiet within my mind. And that's because I'm kind of coming to grips with this post-career, post-job life. And I'm sure this is like people who have been made redundant, people who are in the chat right now who have retired or gone through redundancy, or maybe out of work through ill health. When you're no longer thinking about a job, the space that gets freed up in your mind, and for me, that creates a lot of activity. And so it was really fascinating to talk about the drink aspect of it, which was really just, it wasn't about alcohol. It was about a numbing effect that alcohol and many other things could give you. And that would just be, for me, some quiet. So I wanted to talk a little bit about um, coming out the back of that video. And I really struggled after that to want to make another video. I actually was just wrestling myself with a whole bunch of topics, but then also being like, kind of need a little bit of a break. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit here. Sunday was my dad's second anniversary. Somebody in the channel reached out to me and left me a really nice community post just saying, thinking of you guys. And I really appreciate that people are consciously aware of that date for me. But yeah, so Sunday was the second anniversary. I'm actually just getting a dry throat. I promise you, I'm not getting upset already. Like he's set off, he's going to start crying. Not that. I'm approaching this from a very different mindset now at 2 years. But I took a little bit of time to kind of process it and think about my dad being gone and kind of what's came out of that. And Yvonne and I had a very quiet day in Georgetown. We're on a house sit right now with two amazing little dogs, and I'll cover them. I'll talk a little bit more of that in a future episode. Tonight, I want to just hone in on this topic a little bit. So I spent the day, the anniversary day, very quietly reflecting. Went to the beach, took the dogs for a walk early morning. This is a new routine for me. Normally, I don't wake up till 10 o'clock. Then I would get up and go to the gym when it's just Yvonne and I. But just now, I'm up at like 7 o'clock to take the dogs for a walk down the beach. Loving that. That's just like a whole other aspect of house sitting and pet sitting that I just really love, as a shift up in your agenda. And so that gave me a bit of a chance to kind of also just reflect a little bit, right? And there was a realization in all of that morning, my dad's anniversary of 2 years, that all of this, right, all of the people who have watched this since video one, hundreds of videos later, a year and a half later, to somebody sitting on a live stream talking about Patreon and talking about alcohol and all these kind of things, right, that none of this would have existed without a period of collapse. That's the part that was really living in my head, was that there had to kind of be a collapse before I could come out the other side of all of that. And all of that started from the day that when my dad passed away. Everything started for me to unravel at that point. Unravel in a very kind of specific way. The passing of a family member will do that. And from that point onwards, my dad passing away, the responsibilities that sat with me now in my dad passing, there was a will, and within that will, I was kind of left as a lead executor, but my brother and sister were also executors. There's only the three of us, and then my brother's daughter were named in the will. 4 people, 3 executors, 1 beneficiary. But most of that kind of sat with me now. There were some logistics here. My brother didn't really want to be involved in the process, and my sister was out of the country and trying her best to travel back and forth. So a lot of it kind of sat with me. So I kind of came out of that period like before grief has really had its chance to take its grip, and for you to go on that road. I found myself in this immediate situation of being like, hey, now you've got to manage this estate. And, you know, I talked about that. It took quite some time to play out. It took quite some time to kind of work its way through. And then, of course, there was like, when I think about, you know, I made a video actually, or I think about this, right? I made a video. I was going through my back catalogue. Back catalogue makes me sound like U2 or Pink Floyd or something, right? Videos that I've made in the past covering some of these topics. And I made a video from Kuala Lumpur talking about 497 days. That's how long it took me from my dad passing until everything was dealt with. 497 days. And I kind of dealt with all of that. In the middle of that as well, there was selling his house, selling his possessions, but also we were selling our possessions because I'd had this switch go off in my head where I was like, I've had enough. And what that was like to go through. So there was his house, our house, I never really talked about this before, but we also had a small apartment in Cyprus that we were dealing with, a sale of it as well. That I'd owned for, I don't know, 10 years and decided to part with it. So there was a house sale there. So I was actually dealing with like 3 houses. So all of that was kind of going on. And I had this realization in the middle of all of that that houses to me were becoming a place where I just kind of stored possessions. And when I started this channel in January of last year, again, people will remember Yvonne and I, we went to Lanzarote in April and we had a month there and we went away with just a backpack each. It was like a test. It was like a challenge. Could we live without nothing? And all I had was my laptop, this camera. I made some videos from Lanzarote. We had a month and Yvonne worked 2 weeks of it and then 2 weeks she had off. So we had some nice time together just to kind of reflect. Lanzarote brought back a lot of bumpy moments for us because that was a favourite place of my dad to go to with his late partner and spend holiday time there. So it brought back a lot of memories and I talked also about that in videos. But when we got back home to Northampton, I sat in my own house. And at that point, my house was also filled with a lot of things from my dad's house. And I sat on a couch the moment we got home and I felt the weight of the possessions. And at that moment, I really knew that things had to go and that this kind of progression was coming through of like clearing all of that stuff out. So there was logistics of selling things, selling my own possessions, record collections and computers and desks and monitors and all sorts of things that I documented on this channel, the YouTube channel, shared what was sold, going to the post office, the nightmares we had with deliveries, all of that stuff going on. And then in the midst of all of that, right, was this career position as well, which was my job, because I'd been in a company for 4 years, been in sales for 31 years in total, and had built up a career of being pretty good at talking, just being able to communicate and negotiate and strategize. And then that suddenly was coming to an end at what I thought was like a peak position. I was a European sales director for an international business. I had worked my way up from selling bikes in Halfords. First ever job, didn't go to uni, didn't go to college, left school, straight into employment with my dad in my ear saying, "You've got to have a job, son. You must have a job. You need to pay your way here." Took rent off me the very first second I left school. You've got to pay rent. And that was the ethos, right? That was the got to be in a job. So I joined Halfords part-time, became full-time, and 30 odd years later, still in sales, but as a European sales director. So council estate to sales director, 6-figure salary, talked about the weight of that salary. My final salary, my final position, wage, was £147,000 a year, with bonus structures and everything else that would have probably brought me somewhere around 200,000. When I think back to Halfords, I think my first salary was something like 11 grand a year. So it felt like a huge journey, but it came with a toll, right? It came with a weight that was attached to it, which was going to Germany pretty much every 2 weeks. There was never any off time. There was this Sunday night dread, like oh my God, another week ahead. It's managing a £60 million a year target. Life was like airports, targets, pressure, KPIs, all of that stuff, managing products and inventory and selling cycles and marketing and everything else. And so my dad dies in May. I go back to work a month later. And then it felt like I was in this period of like kind of, oh God, what is happening here? I don't feel right. Kind of struggling to settle back into the job, feeling like I'd had too much time off, but not enough time off. And was still dealing with the house and everything else. And then came conversations about redundancy, right? And in many ways, I'd been manifesting from the beginning of the year wanting a redundancy. Like, I would take a redundancy if it was on the table. I'd go. I feel like I've had my time here, but also wondering what comes next. What do you do next? Kind of panicking and stressing about all of that. But then when it actually comes round, right, it becomes messy. Becomes really messy with the company. Things happened, and it left me feeling very uneasy about the situation. And then I get to November, as that's about to happen. This is 2024, by the way, to give you a time frame of all of this. My dad passed in May of 2024. By November, I'm going through the tail end of redundancy or the negotiation of all of that. And then I have this period where within days of the announcement of redundancy, I collapse at home and I have this unwell period where I don't know what's wrong with me. Having chest pains again, and I'm having all sorts of pains in my belly and everything else. And that would then turn out to be a kidney stone. But at the time, nobody really knew. Thought I was having a panic attack. Thought I was maybe having a heart attack at one point. So I've got all this ill health, and I'm having all these flashbacks to what it was like watching my dad in hospital and feeling like, oh my God, now I'm in a hospital and I kind of look like the same way, dealing with the same things that was kind of going on in all of that time period. So I'm kind of mentally processing all of that. And then we get to January, right? So in the midst of all of that, I've got the psychological effects of like grief and job loss and identity collapse and uncertainty about everything else that's coming, like what life is going to look like at the other side of all of this. And at times, just not even feeling like I could get out of a bed at that point. That would probably be Christmas of 2024. And then January rolls round, right? And then this is where we get to YouTube. And so I felt like I had to do something, right? So I treated myself, and I bought this camera I'm talking to you on now, little DJI Osmo Pocket 3, not an advertisement. Other cameras are available. I buy this, and it took me so much mental effort to actually go out the door and record something. But the 9th of January, which was my birthday, I thought is as good a time as any, right? Start this somewhere. And I don't know why, but that day I got up out of the bed and Yvonne was like, "You going to do it?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm going to do it." And I went outside, and on the canal path that was frozen that morning, I just talked off the top of my head. No planning, no script, no idea what I'm going to say when I walk out the door. I just said something. And then I uploaded it, posted it, and kind of went, right, that's that done. I won't look at that again. And I think a couple of days later, when I kind of came round to having a look at it, I don't know, it was at like 40,000 views and about 2,000 subscribers. And then a day later, it was at like 60,000 views. And in the end, it went to, I think, like 98,000 views in total and about 4,000 subscribers. And I was like, shit, that wasn't the plan. That wasn't what I was expecting. I'd said to Yvonne, if the video gets like 300 or 400 views and I get like 20, 30 subscribers, I'll build from there. And Yvonne and I had said, if we're going to leave, we'll be away by second half of the year. We didn't even know the dates at that point, right? We just were like, if we're going to get out of here. Yvonne hadn't spoken to her work. We hadn't talked about sabbaticals. We hadn't figured out whether she was going to leave. We had none of that. We were just like both on the page of we want to get out of here, do something else. And I'm like to Yvonne, well, if we made a channel and we turned the channel into something, then that would be fun to take with us, might provide us a little bit of income, give us something to do, something to focus on, and a way to kind of talk about all of this. And that was it, right? That was that video. And suddenly there's a ready-made audience who are like, what's next? And in my head, I was like, shit, I've absolutely no idea what comes next. And there was a moment of like total panic, like, oh, whoa, what am I going to talk about? And I think the next video was about alcohol, which brings me back to the weekend, right? About giving up booze at that point. And it did like 25,000 views, but it wasn't 100,000 views. And then the next topic and the next topic, it just went down and down and down. And it was immensely humbling. Like, if there was anything I could say about that whole period, right? I often ask myself, I wonder what my dad thinks about all of this, because his ethic was always have a job, always have a job. He's gone, and this is the first time in my whole life I don't have a job, and he's gone to talk about it. And so I'm like, I don't know if I've totally blown this. Like, where does it go from here? Like, what comes of all of this, right? I'm like, this has all happened like too soon. Because I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, we'll make a wee video here and a wee video there. And then I'm like, well, I've got to jump on this and try and do this now. But what do I talk about? So I just talked about alcohol and ADHD. And people must have been like, what the hell? This started out as a guy talking about adventure. Now he's talking about ADHD. And I was like, whoa, panic. And see, over the next weeks and months, right? I'm still mentally dealing with, I've lost a job. I've lost this career that I've been in all this time. I don't know what comes next. My wife is feeling burnt out, got her own grief going on with family members that passed away. I've lost the biggest influence in my life. We want to get out of here and do something else. I've started this channel and I'm living all of this publicly, right? And so I'm posting it. And here's the next part that I wasn't ready for. Like, strangers judging you on every single detail, right? And this is what I talk about at the beginning, right? When you're kind of like a musician and you make something and then people interpret it. I would say things in an 8-minute or a 10-minute video and think I had communicated myself well enough. And then I would read the comments and read what people would say. And I'd be like, God, this is totally misconstrued. That's not what I mean. Or, I've not explained that enough, because I generally don't write things down. I just talk. That's what I'd done on the first video, talk from my head and my heart. And now all of a sudden it's like, if I don't nail a minute detail, somebody's going to pick it apart and criticize. And I have a mindset where I read these, right? I'll read this all the time. Don't read the negative comments, right? Impossible. There is not a creator on the planet who cannot ignore when there's something negative, even when there's 100 positive. That is how your brain is processed, and you're dealing with it. I wrote a blog on Patreon about this one video that's had 1.4 million views, which is like 14 Wembley stadiums. And of those 14 Wembley stadiums, one full Wembley stadium is full of all the people who criticised it and called me names and said all the things. That's the kind of scale, right? And you're not equipped to do that off the back of thinking like, oh, I'll just make a couple of videos on my canal. And I remember some of the comments, right? I remember them in such vivid detail. I remember one person who said that I was a liar about leaving, that I'd had a breakdown, and that ultimately I'd gone back to work, and that I just wasn't brave enough to say it on camera, that, yep, I've got a job and this is a failed experiment. I thought I could be a YouTuber and it hasn't worked out. I've gone back to work and I just haven't been able to tell you yet. And I had people who were like, just F off. Have you not gone yet? Don't let the door hit you on the arse on the way out, right? And in the middle of all of that, still processing everything, still trying to deal with my dad's house, still trying to deal with his estate, selling his things, selling our own things, deal with grief, deal with identity collapse. All of that is still happening, right? And then I'm getting to the point where I'm like, wow, this is wild, but you've got to just keep moving forward, right? So that's like learning like what visibility is like and what the psychology of all of that is like in real time. And I think that's kind of what the channel, the YouTube channel, right? And then later these discussion points are like there's no long-term plan. I'm figuring it all out as I go along and documenting it. But when I document it, sometimes it will never be enough to answer all of the people, all of the time. And this is why I'm like, how do I get to a point where I can accept when I've made something that I will be misinterpreted, that I will be misunderstood, and that I can let that go? And that is one of the hardest, fundamentally challenging aspects of making stuff, especially on YouTube, right? So then there's like the selling things, right? There's the records, the memorabilia, things that were part of me again as an identity. I'd spent years as a DJ, been traveling all over the world, being a musician, record contracts, built up a record collection, rock music, things that I'd collected over the years. And then it was gone. And friends, even Yvonne at one stage was like, I don't think he'll do it. And I had just made a decision where I was like, it's got to go. It's got to go. Like, I need to make the change. And then suddenly that was sold and off it went. And then finally, my dad's stuff from his house was finally starting to slowly disappear. Things were just either getting given away to charity, and I would go through things and find things. My dad's tendencies were echoed in my tendencies. I don't want to, hoarder's the wrong word, collector, avid collector. My dad was a photographer, so photography equipment, thousands of pictures of events that he had been to, trying to decide, what do you keep, what goes, who wants what, you know, hundreds of decisions every single week, hundreds of decisions. What are we doing with this? How much are we getting for it? What platform are we selling it on? Who's taking it to the post office? Who are we shipping it with? Just mental overload constantly, right? All of that getting to the point of being like, right, we're getting rid of all of this. So all of that goes, right? And then it comes to, right, well, now it's time to leave the UK. Now it's time to actually get to the point of going, right? And I can remember again, trying to think, like, what's the date that you go? When do you just leave the country? What date do you pick in a year? When do you go to another country? Where are you going? How long are you going to be there for? And there was all of these decisions, right? And again, I can remember somebody in the comments was like, are you honestly trying to tell us you're just going to leave the country and you don't know where you're going and you haven't got a visa and you haven't told us any of these plans? And I was like, I mean, yeah, that kind of is it. I know that might be hard for you to swallow, but a lot of this was so loosely planned, which was like, we're going to go. We don't know where we want to go long term. So we're going to keep this a little bit fluid and open, and we're going to sample and try things out. And we're going to live this kind of move around way for a period of time until another decision comes along. But there's also the element of decision fatigue, right? Where you're just like, hey, what cardboard box have we put in this in? Who are you shipping that to? Have you printed that label out? Is that DPD? Is that the post office? Right? What about visas? What about driving licenses? What about where are we flying? Who are we flying with? What day are we flying on? What airport are we leaving from? Just thinking them up off the top of my head, but I remember going through them all. And then suddenly you find yourself with a van packed on your drive. And I told viewers on a video that I'd had this a kind of vision of Yvonne and I standing arm in arm outside the house with a van on the drive. I talked about that very early of last year, that was in my mindset. And suddenly that was happening. I got a picture taken. We're on the drive. The van's there. It's packed. And that's the keys going through the door. Not our house anymore after 13 years. That property was rented. I made a video recently on Instagram saying, no more rent, sold a house. Oh my God. The criticism, you sold a house and you rented a house. Are you dumb? Obviously, again, for people that can't have an imagination that you might have two properties, that one was rented and one was bought. That was what was happening. Sold a house, sold my dad's house, sold a house abroad, flat really, apartment, and rented a house. It's amazing how just those little steps, if you don't say it in graphic detail for some people, can't stitch it together, then comes 1,000 comments on your your video. But the van was packed, right? And off we go. Glasgow now, back home, staying with friends for 2 weeks. in their house, like Yvonne and I, like two students, hiring a car, borrowing a car from a friend, driving around, family members. Hey, we're out of here. See you later. Don't know when we'll be back. Don't know when we'll see you. Don't know what's happening, but we've made the decision and we're going. I mean, I don't think Yvonne's mum and dad listens to any of this. Don't know if her sister or her partner does, but I remember going to see them, and Yvonne will say this. They were like, when are you coming back? I think it kind of almost felt like they thought we were going on holiday because it just hadn't really. If that noise has just kicked in, that's the fridge behind me. It's just turned on. That's what you call adding atmosphere. So they thought we were just going on holiday. Just going on holiday and we'll be back. And we're like, well, we've absolutely no idea when we'll be back. So this is it. All of that was immensely weird. And then our friends taking us to the airport. And that's it. We were gone, right? And I can remember being in Glasgow airport with Yvonne, like tears, of course, right? Emotional, because you're like, God, what are we doing? We made the right decision. What have we done? There isn't moments in all of this journey that those questions don't come up in your head. If you honestly were somebody who would go through all of this and think that that doesn't happen, you're insane. You know, the channel kept me honest at times talking about all of this, whilst people were like, this is just bullshit. You're not really going, right? And all of this kept me honest, was like talking about it and being like, yep, I'm making this happen. I'm making this happen. See the plan through, but still not really having a full fixed plan in all of it. Then what happens next? Well, then comes the unveiling, the video, the unveiling, staying right next to Kuala Lumpur Tower, right? Obviously Dubai for a couple of days. And people were like, oh, you've moved to Dubai. No, we're just here for 5 days, seeing friends and family, breaking up a trip for a bit more emotional reassurance from people who have already left the UK, can share some of that knowledge and experience and what it's like, friends of ours from our hometown. So we stopped in Dubai for 5 days. Then we find ourselves in Kuala Lumpur. Now, at that point, Yvonne and I are like, woof, right, well, now we're in it, right? We're living it. We're at the pool and we're enjoying eating out and we're kind of relaxing and I'm making some videos. We're kind of trying to decompress slightly from everything that I've just told you in the last 34 minutes, feeling like my nervous system is like, doesn't know what the hell is going on, right? What, John, what are you doing? In my head, John, what are you doing? Oh, and then comes illness, right? Then comes medical issues, massive pains, constant vomiting, off to the hospital, rushed in, effectively renal failure on the way. The doctor is like, you are about to have renal failure. Your stats are off the chart, CT scan, tube is blocked, kidneys infected, massively like showing up, showed me the chart, the CT scan, one kidney, all healthy. Other kidney, like crunched right up, and he's like, tomorrow surgery. Are you doing it? And I'm like, gonna have to. And then starts months of an insurance battle, right? An insurance battle with the company who I called them up that day. Hey, I'm in a hospital in Kuala Lumpur. The doctor's telling me I'm close to renal failure. I need surgery tomorrow morning. No problem. We'll help you. We've got the details. And I can tell you in brief details of that, hundreds of emails, chat logs, 6 case managers at one point saying, hey, we're sorry to hear you're ill in Singapore. Not even in Singapore. Never said anything about Singapore. They don't even know where I am. And then paying for it myself, right? So I've got my savings, got some money aside. The first one I think was like 4,000 anyway. Total cost 13.5 grand. Insurance company's like, yep, John, no problem. We'll deal with all of this. And then made it hell. Made it absolute hell. In the middle of all of that, I've got Yvonne like freaking out on her own. We've just arrived. We've sold everything. Now our husband's in hospital dealing with all of this, right? And just as this starts, this is October. At the beginning of November, November 1st, Yvonne gets a call. Company, we're making you redundant. We're we're going to make you redundant. No, we're going to pay you over to another business. And then they're going to make you redundant. And then starts her own internal and mental battles of the logistics of taking many calls, video calls with a new company, and then HR department calls. And in the middle of all of that, I'm in and out of hospital and dealing with all of that, right? And just all of that feels like chaos. Christmas rolls round, entire claims rejected. Yvonne gets made redundant in January. It drags on till the end of January, and then it's completed and she's out of a job. And now she's in the same boat that I was in the year before, thinking, who am I? I've just spent like 30 odd years doing all of this. And suddenly I find myself with no job, and I'm in a foreign country, and I've sold everything and I've no idea what's going on. And my husband's just recovering from sepsis. And now here we are. And in the middle of all of that, right, I said all of that publicly here on this channel. I made videos the whole way through all of it. The channel continued to grow. People came on board with new people joining. Many different comments arrived. A lot of different feedback came through of all of that. About a newsletter system, about a way to just try and expand on some of the things that I talked about where maybe I lost the meaning in some of it. I thought, well, I can explain it a bit more detail in an email. It's like 300 and nearly 400 people signed up, and I write that every single week. And at the beginning of the year, I decided, oh, well, I'll start Patreon, because then I can make videos dedicated to a lot of these topics. And as I opened the start of this chat, right, 123 people have signed up, and I've made nearly 200 posts on it with additional content. And then lastly, at the start of the year, January also, I decided to start an Instagram page. I had a video on there, do the 1.4 million views. The Instagram page has now got nearly 8,000 followers, and I post on there as regularly as I can, and I've documented all of that. And then it gets to the weekend, right? And at the weekend, I'm just battling this thing in my head where I'm like, just this constant, repetitive need to build and structure and progress and do all of these things, right? And I sat down after I made the video about the alcohol, and I read the comments, and I got so many emails from people, and I read all of the emails. I really did read them all. Some I replied to, some I just couldn't reply to them all, right? And I sat there and I was like, what is it that like makes me like this? Right now, I've talked before about ADHD, and this isn't an ADHD discussion. That's just a little bit of a layer in all of this. But what makes me like this the whole way through, right? And I started to really think about it. Now, I've talked on videos before, right? Me, my brother and sister, there's 9 and 10 years of a gap between me and them. I am junior. My mum left when I was a kid, when I was a child, right? When I was about 8 or 9 years old, she left. Talked about this on video 1. And I was raised by my dad, working, blue collar guy, worked in British Steel, worked for Schweppes, and then became a school janitor, where he worked for about 20 odd years as a school janitor. And he always had this work ethic, right? So I, as a child, developed this mindset that output and creativity and action and deliverables equated to love, right? To love. That's what it was like. To get love, you would make yourself required. That was like a mindset, right? Now, this isn't like a psychological breakdown. This is just me processing it. And where I recognize in all of that, right, is that from about 9 years old, I took up football. And I played football till I was 16 years old. I put everything into it. At one stage, I played for 4 teams at the same time. Played for my school, played for my local side, played for the district, right? And I played for a kind of Scotland junior team, like at the age of like 13 and 14, went to Denmark, did all that, was totally committed, training multiple times a week, dedicated to it. And then I got a guitar and I learned guitar. I got right into it. I started a band, got right into that. And at 15, I got decks, turntables, and I learned to mix. And within a few years of that, I would meet some friends in a club and we would be in a band and I would learn music production. From that, music production, that would be like when I was 18. I still make music now at 48 years old. Still do it from time to time. Record labels just contacted me and asked me if I want to put some of my old music back out like 2 weeks ago, and we're talking about all of that. I dedicated myself to all of that, got right into it, samplers and keyboards, and my friends showed me the whole way, and that became like a career. And then in 2020, when lockdown came around, started a Twitch stream, started DJing on Twitch, started in a kitchen area with Yvonne having a laugh. It lasted for 4 years. Then comes YouTube, and I start YouTube, right? And I start making videos and committing to it. And now I'm making a podcast. You might be listening to this on Spotify down the line or on Apple, and where did this podcast come from? That's where it came from, right? That is like a combustion engine inside of me that never stops. It never goes quiet. It's what's made me become a creator or so obsessed with things from like 9 years old until now. That's what's taking me into everything, right? So people that see like I make a video or start a YouTube channel, been creating stuff since I got that first guitar. Building, creating, making, doing all of that from then, right? So this isn't new. This didn't just start at YouTube. It's just been honed the whole way along. And in the middle of all of that, I disrupted it all by having a career, by having a job, right? Just had a job. And all of that job took up everything else time-wise, right? And then see when that job ended and I was able to put the time into this, YouTube, that's where emails, that's where podcasts, that's where, thumbnails and titles and all of that comes from. But every now and then, I just think, God, I wish it could just shut the fuck up for a day. Just a day, right? And that's where the alcohol comes from. That's where that conversation came from. So if the person hears this, right, God bless you for emailing me, but let me give you an example, right? I got an email from somebody who said to me, maybe YouTube isn't your thing. Maybe you should just try doing something with your hands, right? Now, here's how my brain interprets that. I feel like a combustion engine every day. And it's kind of like trying to control the combustion engine from exploding. And that's why I make videos, or I try and add something onto the channel, or I tweak something, or I, make a short, or I go take photographs, right? That's the combustion engine. And that email from somebody saying, do something with your hands, it's a bit like telling a combustion engine to try knitting. That's what it's like. So see, when I said I got all of these emails and some of them really related, right? Some people were like, I know what you're talking about. It's not about the booze. It's about the quiet, right? Some people got that. Others told me about their own situations, highly relatable, struggles with drink, boredom, being out of a job, and using alcohol as a way to escape. And for others, it was completely disconnected from all of that. But I read all of these and I don't read them and think, cool engagement. I kind of wear a lot of those emails for some time. And so when I got a lot of those over the weekend, I actually couldn't come back and make another video because I was like, what the fuck am I going to talk about next? Following up from that, And I didn't make anything. So sitting down and saying this now, because I was like, I can just blurt all of this out over an hour and kind of talk about like what this really means and why I get to this point, right? Because for the people that are in here, the people that listen to all of this, right? I don't know, there's 36 people in here. Normally these live streams, they get about 1,000 listeners once it's gone out and listened to, right? The podcast has had 210 downloads, over the moon, 28 subscribers. Honestly, high-fiving myself about that. So chuffed that 28 people have joined and helped me start something else. But go back to that last video and read through some of the comments, right? There's people who are like, just have a beer, man. Not about the beer. Just try and relax, right? Again, combustion engine, right? Just relax. I mean, let me give you the definition of what relaxing looks like to me. YouTube on the telly, probably talking about some finance thing or some stock thing or how to write options or something like that. Me, one eye on that. Writing my weekly newsletter at the same time and mentally thinking about what I'm going to make as my next video. There's always 3 things running at any one time. Now, you know, some people will hear that and be like, just distraction and trying to block things out. That's active rest to me. That's what it feels like. Active rest would be the easiest way to describe that sensation of creativity and doing all of this. So that's like a brief of what the last, I don't know what it is, 50, I'm terrible with dates and counting things up like this, 15, 16 months have been like. And at the same time, saying it all out loud and being analysed and judged and misunderstood and understood by, I think the channel's on 2.9 million views since last year. And at times I'm like, I've no idea what I'm doing. And so on Sunday, beach walks, 2 dogs that Yvonne and I have just met, cuddles on the couch, like from the 2 dogs while the owner's away, in a completely new place that we don't know anything about, done nothing but be at the house with the dogs, go to the beach, be at the house, go to the beach, go to the shops. And the contrast of life there is incredible, right? That's where you should be saying, just switch off, just relax. But like I say, I'm actively sitting with a computer, watching YouTube videos in my downtime, thinking about how I'm going to talk about all of this, whether I should talk about all of this, whether I just disappear, right? Because I have those moments where I go, I just want to disappear, just want to vanish and not be seen again. But then I also go back to, I've spent my whole life thinking that utility and creativity and being useful equates to being needed, seen, loved, right? I'm not expecting, like, I'm meaning like from a parental situation there. So I think that probably rounds up all of that discussion in like 50 minutes. Honestly, I still don't know, like, I have no idea where any of this ends. Again, I've so vividly remember so many comments. I remember the one that was like, what's the end game in all of this, John? I made a video on a rooftop in Kuala Lumpur saying, or Petaling Jaya saying, why do I need to know the end game? I don't know what the end game is. I barely know what next month is like. But in the middle of all of that, I occasionally have an idea and I think, oh, could maybe take this live stream and turn it into a podcast, and that'd be another way to kind of talk about some of these things and might land with people slightly differently. Right. That summarizes all of that. That's a 50-minute chat, slightly shorter than my usual episodes. But I hope that gives you a little bit of context in all of this. Thanks for listening to all of this. And be back with a video in the next couple of days and a live stream next week. Cheers, everyone. Have a great evening.